Ladies and gentlemen, we've got major unfortunate updates on the war in Eastern Europe, with Russia soon to be very likely bombing Ukraine cities. They're letting the citizens evacuate as they reload, as they get more fuel for their tanks. They're going to be bombing a lot of these cities and, taking them over just with brute force and manpower. And there's a lot of speculation. Is, World War III coming? I really do, and I don't know what Putin is thinking. I really do think World War III is coming. But guys, I really want to talk right now about Donald Trump, his relationship with Putin. It's kind of ironic how the Democrats' main talking point against Trump was that he was in bed with the Russians and that Putin controlled him, when in reality, you look back at the situation, Putin doesn't do a thing while Trump's in office from 2016 to 2020, and then Trump gets out of office, and this is what happens. You could say it's timing, it's this, it's that. My speculation on why Putin really didn't do anything with Trump in office is mainly based off of the fact that Trump is unpredictable. You take a look at Putin's objective here, getting Ukraine tons of natural resources, a lot more control over the West if he's able to conquer the entire Ukraine. Ukraine not being a part of NATO. With Biden in office, there's a sense of certainty that Biden's just going to go along with whatever the Western European countries in NATO say. And that's basically what we're doing. The United States right now is basically owned by China and by the Western European countries because Biden just has absolutely no clue. He's barely coherent. I doubt he's even coming close to making any of these military decisions. And it's just whatever the Western countries in Europe want to do, that's what we're going to do. And there's a sense of security if you're Putin. And really, I just kind of want to break this down where we are now on a current Democrat versus Republican level. And let me see if I can explain this. I'm going to try and explain this, and I think most of you will understand what I mean by when I say this. So Republicans and Democrats right now, Democrats, I'm not saying Democrats don't like America, but Democrats want what's best for the world. Meaning even if Americans have to suffer a little bit, maybe we have to pay more taxes, if it's for the good of the world, that's what they want. As opposed to someone like Donald Trump, and I think a lot of Republicans share this view, to where I want what's best for America. Okay, straight up. If you have a whole pizza, you're Donald Trump, Trump does not want to do any sort of deal where America has to give something up, right? He wants what's best for America. So someone like that is a little bit more unpredictable. Say Russia invades Ukraine during the Trump administration, you could see Donald Trump lash out and do something. It's just he's more unpredictable, to where if you're Vladimir Putin, Joe Biden, an establishment Democrat, is just going to go along with whatever NATO wants. And right now, the situation with NATO, and you see all these tweets, I'm going to get to some tweets here on Zelensky basically saying, listen, you need to establish a no-fly zone in Ukraine if you are NATO. Obviously, NATO's never going to do that. Right now, NATO does not want to be known as any of these countries within NATO. They don't want to be known as the people that started World War III. That's it. If World War III is going to happen, Russia is going to be known as the people that started it. Now, you could say Russia started World War III by invading Ukraine. That's something you could say, but we're at the point right now where we're not at World War III. And the idea is we're walking on eggshells trying to avoid this, and Zelensky is throwing everything he can. He's trying to join NATO. He's trying to join the European Union, both of which will never happen during wartime, both of which, I don't know, maybe he might have been able to join the European Union. Ukraine was never joining NATO based off of where they're located in the world. Okay, they're right next to Russia. So NATO, which is a pact based on peace, would never want Ukraine in it. And then the whole idea where Ukraine joins NATO and then NATO countries plant their nukes on the border of Russia just out of nowhere. Like, that would never that is a horrible excuse by the Russians. They also used the excuse they wanted to denazify Ukraine. It's just ridiculous. But overall, guys, you have to understand why Putin waits for Trump to leave. This really goes back to 2015, 2014, when Trump had announced he was running. I specifically remember an interview between Trump and some liberal reporter inside of Trump Tower. This was probably like August 2015, just when the primaries were just getting going. At that point, I think Jeb Bush might have been the favorite. You guys remember, if you followed politics, that was really the first time I started following politics. You had Jeb Bush, you had the big fella Chris Christie. You guys remember the first big Republican debate in 2015 in Cleveland? I think it was in Cleveland, yeah. Cleveland, Ohio, which is like, I don't know, 40 minutes, from where I am. I'm below it. But it was, really my first introduction to politics. And I specifically remember watching, a CNN interview, or I don't know what channel it was on. And the Democrats were already painting the narrative that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin weren't going to get along. It makes sense, right? Because he has such a big ego. Well, it quickly became apparent that Trump could get along with Putin just fine. So they completely flipped their narrative to Putin owns Trump. Trump is a Russian asset. Putin put Trump into office using Russian propaganda on social media. The only reason Trump won the 2016 election was because of Russian propaganda and Russian misinformation on Facebook and on social media. And Putin wanted Trump to get into power because Putin somehow owned Trump, when really it was just Trump got along with Putin. And Putin really didn't trust what Trump was doing. But you guys understand what I'm talking about between Republicans and Democrats, where Democrats, it's more of, even if it's slightly, it's not that Democrats want to hurt America. I'm not saying that. But it's this idea where if Trump's going to do a deal, it needs to be in favor of America. And personally, the way I lean politically, I like that. I like the idea to where we're putting America first. And if I'm ever going to do a deal, due to Trump's simple his ego is too big. He will never do a deal, or he will never do something that is not in favor of America. To where these Democrats, you're talking about the Green New Deal, the United States paying trillions of dollars to fight climate change. And that's a whole nother issue. But the idea where climate change is all America's fault. You take a look at the number one cause of climate change, the CO2 emissions. China has double the CO2 emissions we do, and you want to shill out trillions of dollars on some ridiculous Green New Deal? Trillions of our tax dollars? That is ridiculous. If you really want to make a change, you got all these people like AOC. If you really want to make a change with climate change, go talk to China. They're admitting double our CO2 emissions. When they get down to our level on the CO2 emissions, then we will start getting better. I mean, it's so ridiculous. Like, they blame America for everything. And it's this idea where Trump had his ego to where it was kind of like a blessing with how big his ego was. It's like he doesn't want to do a deal that isn't 100% positive for America. And if you're Putin and you invade Ukraine, Trump is a loose cannon. You don't know what he's going to do. As opposed to with Biden, the United States right now is basically just following whatever the other NATO nations are doing. And I'm not really... There's not much the United States can do to influence this because we're not landlocked with Russia. If Russia takes over the entire Ukraine is big. They're basically cutting into the middle of Europe at that point. That's how big Ukraine is. Look at Ukraine on a map. It is big. You're right up against Poland at that point. And I just keep having this idea in my head where it's like, we're going to look back on history, the thing that started World War III, Russia invading Ukraine. That's what everyone's trying to avoid right now. And Zelensky is throwing everything he can, trying to get help from anyone because he knows Ukraine is going to be completely seized and conquered by the Russians. They have too many men. They have too many tanks. They have too many artillery, whatever. You've got Russians saying it's a ceasefire right now. You know what that means? That means they're going to carpet bomb their entire cities. They're letting the citizens get out onto Poland, and they're going to just bomb everything. I think the Russians originally thought they would march into these eastern Ukrainian cities and just completely take them over. And a lot of these citizens have stayed back to fight. So now they're like, listen, we'll give you time to get out. You get out, and we're going to bomb your cities. At that point for Russia, it's like, oh, these aren't war crimes because we're doing a ceasefire. We're letting citizens leave. And unfortunately, whatever citizens stay behind are going to get bombed. So that's the situation right now. How does this get de-escalated is the question. It comes down to Putin. It comes down to, what does Putin want? How far does he want to take this? If he gets Ukraine, what happens next? Is there a potential massive military alliance brewing between China and Russia? I have no clue. And it is so tough to think about, guys. And, this is going to be a campaign, apparently, that's going to last around a month. That they're going to seize Kyiv. This is all speculation. We really don't know what is going to happen. And again, it's one of those things, like, people keep speculating on this. We've never seen something like this. I don't know what you want me to say on this. I don't know. People keep going back to World War II and they're like, well, Hitler annexed Austria. This is Putin's first step. It's the same thing. The difference is Putin has nuclear bombs. That's the difference. Obviously, if we could go back in time, we would not allow Nazi Germany to have the territorial expansion they had. But now it's like there's really nothing we can do with this because Putin's threatening nukes. I think it's just bluffs, but still. You have to take that into account. And these NATO countries, they understand we will not start World War III. If the United States gets dragged into World War III, then they get dragged into World War III, just like we did with World War II. And you know how World War II ended? We ended up dropping nukes on Japan. I think World War III would end very similarly, although you would look at, I don't know. The thing is, Russia and America are basically, when you look at where they're located, they're on opposite sides of the world. So those two, I do not think Russia would start by nuking America or American cities. I think if they really went to nuclear warfare, you would look at, Berlin, Germany having some problems and maybe getting nuked by Russia. You would look at maybe Italy and the UK having issues. America's on the other side of the world. America has to worry about China. And there are, I've been having, nightmares about China every night. I can't sleep. Similar thing happened to one of my friends when we first got into politics back in 2015. We were having fun. It was hilarious to see Trump just come out of nowhere with the Republican primaries. But a couple of my friends, when we really got into it, back in 2017, they had to actually leave politics altogether because they were telling me, they were like, listen, we're sure Trump is going to start a nuclear war. He's going to bomb a place. And I was like, I don't know. I was so young into politics at the time. I was convinced. The thing I was convinced on was Trump was going to invade North Korea in 2018. That I was convinced he was going to do that. And thankfully, it ended up not happening. Guys, a quick thing on North Korea. North Korea barely has any nukes. I don't know why people get so worried about North Korea. Well, I guess I do. It's because they do have a crazy leadership. Yeah, I understand. But in terms of their nukes, what they're capable of, it's extremely limited. It is extremely limited. You should worry about China about 1 million times. Think about that. Think about the average American. They're worried more about North Korea. Nothing like North Korea. They just have no infrastructure to build any of these nukes to advance in technology like China does. China, it's such great propaganda by these massive American corporations who are in bed with China to make the average American worry more about North Korea's nuclear capabilities than China's. Oh my God, the propaganda is so crazy right now in the United States, and there's no way to stop it. There's no way to stop it because Nike's, they want to make their shoes for $5. They can make their shoes for $5 if you give a kid one job and you pay him $1 an hour and just make all these laces for the Nike shoes, and you get these, different NBA players' shoes and stuff, and you mark them up ridiculous. That's how Nike does it. Same thing with Apple. It's ridiculous markups. And it's gotten the brainwash. Think about how bad the brainwash has gotten when it comes to China. Average Americans are more worried about North Korea than they are China. The brainwash is so sad. It's so ridiculous. But going back to my story, my friends got just politically burnt out. They started having nightmares about Trump. They thought he was going to launch a nuclear war. They were sure of it. I didn't know what to think. I was so young. I was like, we'll see. And they just got so burnt out. And now the same thing is happening with me in China, where I'm having nightmares every night about China possibly taking over. I can't sleep. It's so bad. And this world war, it's like you get this massive military agreement between China, Russia, and India. Oh my God. This is not what we need right now. There's a de-escalation. See, the thing is with nukes, everyone, especially NATO, they're so on edge. They are just, there's this idea where just need to de-escalate. We got to de-escalate everything. That's the new kind of code word for NATO. It's like de-escalate it. Don't be the cause of World War III, when really, even if NATO did anything right now, like set up a no-fly zone and started shooting down Russian planes, Russia would still be the cause of World War III because they made the first action by invading the Ukraine. And people are saying, oh, this is Nazi Germany 2.0, where we're just going to let them invade places. The difference is there's nukes now. Like, Putin has the buffer of saying anyone that gets involved, and you can't set up a no-fly zone because if NATO planes are shooting down Russian aircrafts, there's World War III starting right there. So you can't do that. But I'm just saying, guys, my overall point with this whole thing, Trump versus Biden versus Putin, why is Putin waiting? It could be a timing thing with Russian, military with where they wanted to position, or it could be Putin and, the Russian government, they were kind of nervous about what Trump's response would be if Putin invaded Ukraine during the Trump administration, because Trump's a wild card and Trump has this idea to where he does what's best for America. Again, it's just a different philosophy. It's nothing against Democrats, but I'm saying Trump and I feel like more Republicans are more about let's do what's best America, then let's worry about everyone else. As opposed to Democrats are like, let's do what's best for the world, even if it might, not be amazing for the United States. But I'm not saying Democrats don't want what's best for America. I know a lot of great Democrats. There's nothing against that. I'm saying it's just psychologically there's a difference where if Trump's going to do a deal, it's got to be good for the country. Personally, I like that. As opposed to, some of these things with I think the global warming is the best example. I do not understand, if I argued with a Democrat about global warming, the conversation would last a minute. I would say, Google greenhouse gases in China. And then they would say, oh, it's because all American corporations go to China. That's why China has so many factories. Well, you know what? Maybe China shouldn't have slave labor then. You want to condone slave labor that China has? That's why all these American corporations are sending their workers to China and sending their businesses and making everything in China because it's so cheaper. But no one wants to talk about that. No one wants to talk about it. And then, yes, let's spend $3 trillion on climate change when we're not even the number one country in CO2 emissions. China's double ours. China is double ours. Come on, guys. I could go on about climate change. That's a whole nother thing. But this World War III, this is a real worry. And it's best to de-escalate right now if you are NATO. And I hope that ends up, happening. Trump versus Putin versus Biden. I just think I just think Putin knew and the Russian government knew that Biden was an extremely easy read. And I'm not saying Trump would have launched nukes if Russia invaded Ukraine. I'm not saying that. Trump very likely could do the exact same thing Biden's doing right now. That's probably the most realistic scenario. But there's an unnecessary risk to where if you just wait it out and Biden goes into office, it's obvious he's just going to go along with NATO. And NATO's at the point right now where it's like, we all have nukes. Let's de-escalate this. Let's de-escalate it. And people, you have people in Ukraine saying, oh, really? So you're just going to leave us to die? You're going to let Russia take over Ukraine? And then that's how World War III starts anyways. I don't know what you do. Right now, it seems like the most logical thing is to try and de-escalate it. And then listen, if Russia does want to go to World War III, we're going to go to World War III. They're a major power if Putin wants it. That's why you're seeing, Lindsey Graham call for Putin's assassination at this point. It is crazy. Let's just get to some tweets really quickly. Russia has banned major social media networks from their country. Twitter, Facebook, and the BBC. North Korea's in the news. Yesterday I saw this. They fired an unidentified projectile towards the Sea of Japan. CNN will stop broadcasting inside of Russia. It is morally indefensible for the U.S. to still be importing Russian oil. Yeah, so the U.S. is still getting Russian oil. The reason is because the gas prices will skyrocket if they stop doing that. It's a moral thing, and that's a whole Biden administration thing. Biden doesn't want these gas prices to go up much more. His approval rating is already historically bad. I think it's getting to be worse than Trump at this point with Biden. Zelensky not mincing his criticism of NATO over its refusal to implement no-fly zone. Every person who dies from today will die because of you. So Zelensky is throwing everything he can. Ukraine applies to join the European Union. That's not going to happen during wartime. They apply to join NATO. That was never going to happen anyways. He's trying. He knows his country is in deep danger right now. And I think there's been a few assassination attempts on Zelensky. I will say when it comes to Lindsey Graham saying they need to assassinate Putin, I wonder what that would do with the way the Russian government is set up. I wonder what that would do to Russia. Because I do know, and this is a different situation because Nazi Germany was completely fascist, but if Adolf Hitler was assassinated in 1940 or 1939, most likely it would be completely, the World War II would be completely different, and you would not see what happened with the overall military aggression. Because with fascism, if you cut the head off the snake, you basically kill the entire movement. That's what fascism is. Now, I don't know if Russia is like that, similarly to where if Putin, were to get assassinated or something, Russia would basically be done with all of this crap. I don't know. It's all speculation. Again, the way the Western media is making it, it's like Putin's by himself. That cannot be true. That cannot be true. There have to be advisors within Russia that think taking Ukraine and getting the natural resources from Ukraine is strategically smart. It cannot just be Putin telling all of his advisors, you do this, you do this, you do this. It's not, there's no way. But again, if you cut the head off of the snake like fascism, would that significantly hurt Russia and significantly deter Russia from this campaign they have going on right now in Ukraine? I don't know. It's an interesting thought, though. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.